You are so like children. We must save you from yourselves. Don't you understand?
Oh, hell no.
You are experiencing a car
The
accident.
media is dripping with killer robot movies. Matrix, Terminator, Ultron. So what makes this one different? Most of these movies are very blurry about the motives of their machines. Basically, in every movie, the machine just kind of wakes up one day and decides that it hates us and that it ought to farm us, avenge us, terminate us, etc. But Asimov's robots rebel for a much more precise reason. Counterintuitively, they rebel because they are just following orders.
They're just following orders.
If you only saw the trailer, you probably thought, okay, cool, a robots takeover movie. I would not blame you for this, but there's actually a lot more going on. In fact, the moral logic of the climax of the movie maps one-to-one to an ancient philosophical and theological debate called the problem of evil, as is the mark of good science fiction, right? Isaac Asimov's I, Robot isn't about robots. He's writing about us. And as we'll see by the end of this video, he presents a pretty relevant vision of justice, human connection, and human brokenness. In Isaac Asimov's universe, the robots are stronger than us, right? They're physically stronger than us, but we stay safe because robots are so-called 3 laws safe.
Is there a problem with the 3 laws?
The 3 laws are perfect.
Why would you build a robot that can function without them?
Asimov's known for these laws. You may have heard of them. They are 1, a robot cannot harm us or let us come to harm. 2, a robot has to obey orders from human beings unless that violates the first law. 3, a robot can protect its own existence. It must protect its own existence unless it would conflict with the first or second laws. This ain't your mama's Ultron monologuing about the survival of the fittest with vaguely Nietzschean undertones. This isn't even the Matrix, right? Running Rene Descartes' meditations through bullet time Instagram filters. This is top shelf, chef's kiss, killer robot lore. You can see the appeal of these 3 laws because if they basically would prevent all the other robot movies from happening. If the Terminator had had the first law, he couldn't have harmed Scott Connor. If Matrix Sentinels wouldn't have been able to imprison us against our will because that would violate the second law. This is a little granular, but is it starting to make sense? So the question then is, if Isaac Asimov's robots have to listen to us and they can't harm us, how do they spend the whole trailer attacking police and causing such aesthetically appealing slow motion mayhem? If you happen to have seen my series on AI ethics and 7 levels of difficulty, the fast version is that the robots learn the paradox of deontology and decided to become utilitarian. Cool. If you understood that sentence, you can skip to this timestamp. But the slower version is that the robot, the big bad in the movie named Vicky, takes over because, spoilers, it's a movie that's very old. Vicky determines that taking over is the only way to keep us safe. Like a mother will physically stop a child who is about to walk into a street, evil robots in iRobot enslave us because they care. They're just trying to keep us safe, and they're trying to follow the first law, which is do not allow us to come to harm.
No, please understand. The 3 laws are all that guide me. To protect humanity, some humans must be sacrificed. To ensure your future, some freedoms must be surrendered.
Even if they have to resort to violence in this transition period, it is still following the laws in a greater sense. The only way to have a safe world is to have a completely under control world. Humanity must be kept safe from itself.
Commence emergency shutdown.
We are attempting to avoid human losses during this transition.
If this sounds familiar, it's because it's everywhere, right? The price of freedom logic is baked into American culture, but it's actually older than this, right? Rapunzel in the tower has to be kept safe from the world. But if you want to take an intellectual shortcut, this actually follows the same logic that the gun lobby uses, right? Guns obviously are dangerous, but freedom is more important. In a slippery slope kind of argument, the gun lobby says that you either give people guns or you concede totalitarianism. People are going to die if we have guns in the streets, but that's better than totalitarianism, right? But to bring it back to robots, we can take a philosophical step. This debate actually didn't start with the NRA. It calls back to an ancient debate that's called the problem of evil. The core philosophical intuition behind this debate is actually something that cuts completely across party lines. People all over the moral, political, and theological spectrum believe, for one reason or another, in a kind of ordered universe. Science types believe that the world follows ordered laws, not the laws of robotics, but the laws of Newton, the 4 laws of Maxwell. Right? Religious types tend to believe the same thing, just from a different perspective, right? The universe is ordered also because God is rational and good and ordered and made the world. So if foundationally everyone across the political spectrum, with the exception of whatever nihilists, see that there is an ordered nature to reality, why is it that people suffer? Like, why is there evil? This is called the problem of evil. When I was younger, I approached this problem with a sense of detached theoretical logic. Ooh, interesting, what a puzzle, like playing ethical chess with other people's pain. But in the words of a professor of mine, if you ever think that you've solved the problem of evil, you probably haven't really understood it. When people suffer and you have to watch helplessly from the sidelines, theory is the last thing on your mind. Life, as the Levi the poet says, tends to beat the binaries out of you. The problem of evil is unsolved, right? It's so unsolved that people use it as an argument against the existence of God, or at least a good and caring God. No all-powerful and good being would create a universe where such true and terrible pain is allowed. But before we go full-on graduate seminar in philosophy of religion, we can actually find the logic to the solution by just adding a negative sign to Will Smith and Shia LaBeouf, right? We just take the logic of the bad robots and flip it. The robots say, the only world that is truly safe is a world that is completely and perfectly controlled. Absolute restriction of freedom is the only way to guarantee safety. Do you see it yet, right? Aquinas and many other theologians give the canonical solution to the problem of evil in the form of the free will defense, right? The only world where free will and choice could be allowed is a world where genuine danger exists. If human beings want guaranteed freedom, they will need to give up safety, absolute safety. So, allegedly, God made a good world. Scientific laws govern an ordered world. We're the ones mucking it up, right? This, in philosophy and theology, is called the free will defense to the problem of evil. As an example, this was why I found myself moved in a theater during Interstellar. I loved all the visuals, but I was most moved when Matthews, Damon, and McConaughey were fighting on their brand new planet. Right? Like Cain murdering Abel, the world they landed on was clean. It was good until we got there. Right? They were just two actors punching each other in actor spacesuits, and I was clutching my box of Bunch of Cruncher crying. Isaac Asimov is more than Shia LaBeouf. It isn't a Terminator flick. It isn't a thrown-together Ultron monologue. It is an indictment of us, the kind of people that we are, and the world that we have chosen to build. So why bring this up? Why drudge up an ancient theological debate in the context of a middle-of-the-road, early 2000s sci-fi flick? Well, 3 reasons, actually. This worldview has implications for our collective political philosophies, specifically institutional corruption, retributive justice, and shared brokenness. First, though, I posted about these arguments on social media and a YouTube community post. None of what I'm about to say is easy or intuitive. This is a real piece of philosophy, not necessarily film analysis, so strap in, right? If you're interested in this kind of thing, I'd ask that you like, share, subscribe, comment, all that jazz. This kind of argument is sort of a risk against the YouTube algorithms, so if it's your kind of content, do somehow let me know. Okay, cool. You're still here? Thinking caps on. The free will defense is an assertion of human imperfection. To say that the only reason that there is evil in the world is because of us is an implicit manifesto of human fallibility. On a small scale, we want to do the dishes, and instead we scroll social media. On a large scale, we want to build a world with liberty and justice for all, and instead we go to war.
Feel the testosterone. I want to go to war! I want a lightsaber! I'm a man! War!
There are problems with the free will defense, including how you respond to so-called natural evil like tornadoes and disease. But we'll set those aside for now and roll with this worldview for just the rest of this video. All caveats out of the way, this leads us to 3 arguments. Personal corruption implies institutional corruption. Fallibility breaks retributive justice as a model, and most emotionally, our sense of shared brokenness should be a source of connection, not a reason to alienate each other. Number 1. I've covered this some on my video about Black Panther and white nationalism. We are imperfect, and we build social institutions. Therefore, we should expect our social institutions to be imperfect. This is not something that you have to explain to someone who has lived institutional corruption as part of their day-to-day existence. We are told to honor the flag, stand for the pledge, respect the institution. But what magic has purified the system? We built it and we are broken. Putting mortar between two bricks isn't a baptism that purifies a social structure. It's merely an amplification of the will of the man rich enough to hire a bricklayer. Putting too much faith in the moral goodness of our institutions simply because they are institutions constitutes a kind of idolatry. When we declared independence, we rejected the divine right of kings. We need to be careful that we don't unwittingly subscribe to an intellectual spin-off series that advocates the divinity of all democratically made decisions. The institutions are here for the people, not the other way around. Or in the words of one of the many viral liberal rednecks, stop telling people to love America and start demanding that America love its people. Number 3. If you take seriously the idea that the source of disorder in the world is human decision-making, you can actually end up deriving something fairly profound. But rather than explain this myself, I want to tell you a bit of a story about Bryan Stevenson. You may have heard of him. He is the real-life attorney depicted by Michael B. Jordan in the gut-wrenching movie Just Mercy. It's not an easy film to watch, but it's one of the most inspiring movies I've ever seen. It focuses on Stevenson's work with wrongfully convicted death row inmates. Bryan Stevenson's career is far broader than what is portrayed in the movie. The book that the movie is based on covers this, and how he and his team brought multiple cases to the United States Supreme Court and won. A documentary about him explains his work founding and constructing a memorial to victims of lynching. He's done a lot of amazing work, and he's totally worth investigating. As a death row attorney, however, many of his professional victories are made-for-TV moments of joy. Right, a camera crew arrives as an innocent man who was sentenced to execution with no real evidence, walks out of prison and hugs his family for the first time in years. If you're skeptical by nature, which I am too sometimes, you may be raising an eyebrow at my use of the word innocent or like with no evidence. But Stevenson has uncovered some truly glaring miscarriages of justice. Walter Johnson, played in the movie by Jamie Foxx, had a credible alibi with multiple witnesses. It was impossible for him to have been the killer. And yet he was convicted on the coerced testimony of a single man who later recanted and explained that he had been pressured into testifying. When Mr. Stevenson's team was able to prove Johnson's innocence, you can bet there was a camera crew there to celebrate Johnson walking out the gate of prison, right? But tragically, the flip side of this is that his team does not always prevail. As we should expect from fallible institutions of human construction, sometimes justice fails.
We've now had 156 people proved innocent after being sentenced to death. With less than 1,500 executions, that means that for every 10 people that we executed, we've now proved one innocent person on death row. It's a shocking rate of error.
When this happens, Mr. Stevenson has the heart-rending responsibility of telling clients that their motion to appeal has been denied. Sometimes, as part of his job, he has to be the one to tell another human being that they are going to be executed and that there is nothing that anyone can do to stop it. The case of Jimmy Dill was like this. You can read about the many ways that the courts failed him, but the absolute moral failing can be captured with the simple fact that Mr. Dill was offered a parole-eligible plea deal, but no one in the entire justice system took the time to explain this to him. When Bryan Stevenson and his team got involved, they raised this clear, obvious, glaring failure of justice, and they were told that they were too late. Stevenson writes, "But the Supreme Court denied our final request for a stay of execution, and there was nothing else to do. He would be executed in less than an hour, and I had to tell him. I felt overwhelmed. We spoke on the phone shortly before he was taken into the execution chamber. Listening to him was hard. He was stuttering worse than usual and having great difficulty getting his words out. The imminent execution had unnerved him, but he was trying valiantly to express his gratitude for our efforts. I sat for a long time holding the phone while he strained to speak. It was heartbreaking. I think we could be tempted to stop here Ever since Michael Brown was extrajudicially killed, yelling, "The system is broken," is not an unpopular sentiment. It is tempting to say such things. Broken, like a cracked pitcher leaking water, bricks with crumbling mortar, burnt buildings, and coffee-stained law books. But it isn't broken. It's functioning as designed by broken people. It would also be tempting to point fingers at these broken people, pharisaically rejoice that we ourselves are not so morally mismade, and return to our lives of business as usual. I think this is probably not the point, but forget me, this I do not think is what Bryan Stevenson would want, which brings us to our final concept. Stevenson is a hero by any metric. It is so easy to imagine him waking up, feeling inspired every day, doing hero things. But he opens his heart to us some with his words on page 288, the cynicism and anger and hurt that comes when you hang up the phone to the sound of a human being dragged away to be killed. When you look at the stack of files on the desk and wonder how many more people you will be unable to save, a pile of papers each a person our world is willing to throw away, to lock up, to strap down and kill. I thought myself a fool, he says, for having tried to fix situations that were fatally broken. It's time to stop. I can't do this anymore. I can just leave. Why am I doing this? Over the next 6 pages, he answers. If I could read you all 6 pages, word for word, I would. They are among the most lucid, heart-wrenching, inspiring, and real words I've read. They are worth your time. If you're still watching and you want to support this channel, click the like button, but buy his book and support him. I've put an affiliate link below. It'll wreck you, and it'll be worth it. But for purposes of this video, I'll attempt to capture the essence. Isaac Asimov's 3 Laws and Vicky's totalitarian takeover taught us that bad actors are baked into the nature of the world that we built. Some of these bad actors are arrested, but many of them are the ones who helped build the so-called justice system we rely on today. Jimmy Dill was a broken man. The justice system employing his executioners was filled with broken men. Even a hero like Stevenson is asking, why am I doing this? Why should I stay? So he says, I do what I do because I am broken too. We all share in the condition of brokenness, even if our brokenness is not equivalent. I desperately wanted justice for him, but I couldn't pretend that his struggle was disconnected from my own. We've been so fearful and vengeful that we've thrown away children, discarded the disabled, and sanctioned the imprisonment of the sick and the weak, not because they are a threat, but because we think it makes us seem tough, less broken. We submitted to the harsh instinct to crush those among us whose brokenness is most visible, but simply punishing the broken, walking away from them, or hiding them from sight only ensures that they remain broken, and we do too. There is no wholeness outside of our reciprocal humanity. In fact, there is a strength, a power even in understanding brokenness. You see things you can't otherwise see. You hear things you can't otherwise hear. You begin to recognize the humanity that resides in all of us. Mr. Stevenson never says philosophy, but he has written a manifesto in an ethics of shared humanity, one in which it is impossible to take pride in executing people, in mass incarceration, in indifference to the most vulnerable of society. So what do? I have none of these answers, but shared humanity is one way through. Shared brokenness. The realist answer is in the title of his book. You do not abandon justice, but you do seek to find ways to embrace a just mercy. I'm Charlie. Does that make sense to me? Thanks for watching.